President Trump's last-minute demand on the COVID-19 relief and stimulus bill, raising checks to $2,000, is set to be put forward as soon as possible. But our next guest gave the president guidance on the bill, specifically on the tax credits and resolutions that passed this week. And so he's going to help us break all of this down. He joins us now. Julio Gonzalez is the CEO of Engineered Tax Services. Julio, thank you for joining us. This is a pretty complex issue for folks, people who trying to understand why this whole thing sort of went sideways over the last couple of days. First of all, what advice did you give the president on how to make this bill beneficial for taxpayers?
Well, some of the big parts of it really were the forgiveness on the PPP and allowing it to be tax deductible. So many small businesses took advantage of that, not knowing from Treasury that those would be taxable dollars. And so that was a big part of it, and we were able to get that into the bill. Obviously, getting some employer tax credits for individuals as well, so that we decouple that so that both now businesses can take advantage of the employer tax credits and the PPP loans, where both couldn't be taken advantage of. You could only have one or the other. So those were big things for the business community, and obviously then getting some stimulus money to the individuals out there to get the economy rolling again.
Julio, it also reined in the power of the Fed to create these emergency spending programs where they could pretty much do whatever they want. I understand where the president's coming from. Okay, politicians and lobbyists live high on the hog all year, and they kind of give Americans a few crumbs. But is doling out these bigger checks really the answer? And do you think that that's fiscally responsible? Projecting out how you think the Democrats are going to try to continue to roll with that sort of economic approach?
It's, pick the poison, right? It's like we're going to increase more debt, but are we better off giving that money to individuals to get the economy going, get them spending money so that that money starts to circulate? And I think that's the real bet. It's not that money is going to stay under their bed and not get back into the economy, right? They're going to put it into the consumer markets, the banks, the stock markets,
right,
and get that money circulating to generate more tax revenue. We saw that when we lowered the income tax rates. You would think just the opposite. Less money would go into the Treasury, but actually more did because more people were hired, low unemployment, actually more tax collection. So it's a gamble, it's a bet, but he's betting on the people to put that money to good use.
Are you concerned about setting a precedent that liberal Democrats, though, will put on steroids? I get that the president wants to put more money in people's pockets. They have other designs for what to do with putting more people, making more people dependent on government. Are you concerned about that?
Extremely concerned. I mean, the administration, the Biden administration, wants to take away the tax reform that we put in place, right? They want to increase the tax rates. They want to take away the tariffs. They want to put back the regulation. And I think could be a disaster coming out of a pandemic, and that could lead to a Great Depression. So I think the president thinks just the opposite right now, that we need to get money back into the consumers, get that individual spending going, and come out of it with the virus and come out of this and not go into that Great Depression.
I think the president's overarching point is that the system is broken. Stop taking people's money in the first place and then giving it back to them and kind of make them think that you're doing them a favor. And that's the way Washington works, right? And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is president, because the system is broken. But how do we get to a point where we are trying to reduce taxes more, reduce spending more, because that's the best prescription for economic growth, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. Why take it and then have to give it back?
Right.
So, look, when we lowered the income tax rates in the tax reform in 2017, we had to do it because we needed to be competitive globally. Like, you see it in New York, right? They're raising taxes there. They're raising taxes in California. They're not opening up for businesses. And what happens? People leave. And the people that leave are the ones that are paying the taxes. Their tax basis leaves. And who's left to pay the tax bill? It's the middle class. And that's the same as it is globally. We have to keep the income tax rates low to keep the businesses here, to keep the jobs here. Otherwise, they just go where that's much lower rates. And it is all over the country, right? I mean, all over the world, there's much lower rates. And we see the same thing. When you raise the high taxes in New York and all the other states, people leave.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Georgia coming up, the two races in Georgia, is so important to be a backstop against the Biden tax increases that he's proposed. So, the president, I'm assuming he wants to try to pay for this by taking out the pork from the overall spending package. Democrats aren't apt to do that. They're not likely to strip down these bills the way that the president wants. How do you see this shaking out? Do you think ultimately that he will sign this legislation that you worked on with him, or what do you see happening here?
Well, yeah, there's three scenarios, right? I mean, the first scenario is he signs it, he gets some compromise, but this morning he didn't get any compromise because the Republicans in the House turned down the $2,000 initiative, so that's gone, right? So, and do you strip it and get the money from the money that's going to these museums, these other, government institutions? That's one solution, but it doesn't seem like anyone's moving there. So he could veto it, and then Congress can override that with 2/3 vote, or we could go to a pocket veto, right, where after 10 days it becomes law. So I think there's three avenues here, and we'll see what happens. But my guess is somehow it gets signed, within the next week.
All right. Julio Gonzalez, Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for being here with us.
Merry Christmas.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.